thank you all for coming. And I also wanted to especially thank PyData Pittsburgh for the opportunity to share my journey with you. Tonight, I am going to share with you a journey that I went on after I installed Tesla's solar on my roof. My name is Christopher Pittsburgh, and some quick background information about me. I have a degree in computer science from the University of Dayton and computer engineering, go Flyers. I've worked for Microsoft, Amazon, and now I'm a software engineer working on self-driving cars in the cloud. It's a lot of Kubernetes and, of course, a lot of Python. Outside of work, I enjoy computer gaming, building desktop computers. What you see in this picture is a computer I built myself during the pandemic. So, in 2024, we decided to install solar on our house, and we loaded it up with as many panels as we could. As you see on the left, we have 50 panels on the roof, rated for a total of 20.5 kilowatts. On the right, you see the solar inverters. These are combined 15.2 kilowatts of AC power output. And yes, it does actually get to the 15.2 kilowatts AC during the peak of the summer. I could go on and on about the lessons I learned installing this. But first, let's ask the most important question. Show me the money. So, this is the production from last year. 18.5 megawatt hours, weighs in about $4,000 total when you combine the SREX and the power for the electricity. However, you'll notice that on the right, this app here, this Tesla app, this is what Tesla tells me my system is doing. It's not very detailed. It doesn't give you enough nerdy details for my taste. I wanted more. And therefore, I wanted to show you something. If any of you have brought your laptops, now's the time to get them out. You go to solar.pitstick.net. You can also do this on your phone. Oh, we just jump right in to a live demo here. This is the dashboard that has a lot more nerdy details of what is happening on my roof. The power flow diagram on the right here shows what's going on right now. So the sun is setting, so it's not generating too much power right now. It tells you how much power the sun's generating, how much power my house is pulling from the grid, and how much power my house is using. On the right, we have the historical tracking of the past few hours here. Yellow is what the sun produced. Purple here is the grid. Negative means we're pushing power back to the grid. And blue is a bit harder to see. It is what my house is using. The other thing that this energy flow diagram correlates with is it also shows you the weather a little bit. So it says it's kind of cloudy, and it also shows the temperature. So it's really cool to see that when the white cloudy line goes up, the yellow goes down, as we would expect. All right, so we will skip power meters and monthly analysis for now, and go down to a section that I look at a lot, which is the string power. Inverter string data. For reference, a solar string is like a string of Christmas lights. It's a bunch of panels connected in series. This shows all of the nerdy electrical stats of all of them, the voltage, the current, the power, and then the combined power of each inverter. This is critical to knowing if the system is functioning properly. And foreshadowing, this will matter a bit later. All right, moving on. We skip system vitals, and we go down here to the alerts graph. I spend most of my time staring at this graph. Right now, everything is good. These errors are all normal, or these alerts are all normal, even though they sound a bit scary. But I've jumped to the end of the story to show you the working dashboard. Let's go back to the beginning. first question that I wanted to ask after my installer set things up is, how do I know the thing that I paid $38,000 for is working well? About a week after the system was turned on, I went into the garage and I noticed this. Here. Maybe we get here. You hear the beeping noise? It was very faint. Anyway, TLDR, the big complex inverter box that they just installed, that I paid a lot for, is suddenly blinking and beeping. That can't be good. And I wanted to know what that meant. But how do I do that? All right, this is where it gets a bit complicated. Turns out Tesla does provide a way to dive into how the solar system is working, but it's not easy. In this talk summary, I said Tesla's metrics are opaque. This is part of why. The main Tesla app, the one in red, does not provide stream level data or the alerts that I showed you earlier. And those are critical for determining if your system, your expensive system, is working properly. I've only ever seen it give me a warning once on a consumer level dashboard, when there was nearly a foot of snow on the panels in January. That's not enough. Obviously, it's not going to work when there's a foot of snow on the panels. But what about under normal circumstances? You have to use a different app, an app that if you ask Tesla or the solar installer, they say do not use for installers only. Well, screw that. I signed in anyway. So this Tesla One Blue app, it connects directly to the inverter's AP. So the inverter itself is its own router, and you have to connect your phone directly to the inverter to get this data. And yes, it's distinct from the red Tesla app, which is very annoying. Anyway, I did set up the Tesla One app, and I started to see some stuff. If you look, my house is supposed to have 8 solar strings, 4 per inverter. But here in this screenshot, 3 of the 4 are gray. After some research, the gray means the inverter box has lost contact with the roof. And if you're thinking, wow, that's bad, yeah, that's bad. Sometimes that means the strings don't work at all, and sometimes it means it's pushing power in spite of the safety devices not working. So you see over here, some of the voltages and current is almost nothing, and in this case, in this one, it's working. For purposes of this slide, MPPT is a string. After seeing that gray, I was very concerned, obviously. And I wanted to dive deeper into the Tesla One data without being constrained to my little phone. There's so much data on that dashboard, it's really hard to look at it on the phone. I've tried. As Tesla solar products are pretty well used across the United States, I decided that I was going to need help from the open source community. So I searched the web for how do I monitor my Tesla solar installation? And I find Jason Cox's PyPowerful project, which he started in 2021. A working version of which is what you saw in the live demo earlier this evening. I've been in regular contact with Jason since I found the project, and I've contributed to the project regularly. It is written in Python, and it turns out it has a pretty active community. All right, time to dive in. Here again is a picture of the system in my garage. I mentioned earlier that the Tesla One app connects to a router on the inverter itself. That means it only allows you to look at one inverter at a time. But there are, if my accountant from Sesame Street has educated me properly, there are 2 of them, right? And what about people who have a solar farm with 3, 4, 5, or more inverters, or power walls? Tesla documentation says modules are allowed to stack, so they would be affected by this too. So this is where I have to get to coding. Dive into the open source project, turn on multi-inverter mode, and, oh, that's not good. It says to do, add support for multiple power walls. So the open source community never actually implemented that. But it says to do, not never do. And this is written in Python. So let's get hacking. All right, start with configuration. The first decision I had to make was how to load the configuration for more than one inverter. This is the code that I wrote that does it. Out of the box, the system loads the configurations for a single inverter, the IP address, the password, and so forth. My modification over here is to add a little underscore. If the code sees an underscore, it knows that there's more than one going on, so that it needs to load. If it doesn't see an underscore, then it just loads one. Next, I have to modify the system to query information in parallel by spinning up multiple server threads. And finally, after setting up all the server threading objects, I have to write in the handler function. We pass that to a threading HTTP server, which then works if you run serve forever. Some of you may ask, well, this looks complicated. Why didn't you not just use fast API? Well, good question. The framework wasn't written using that. There is talk of updating the framework to use fast API and have a new setup for it. But right now, it was using the bare bones, old school Python raw handler. So that's what I used. The handler maps paths and for the get and post method, for the get and post methods to their actual functions. And then these functions mostly invoke under the hood. It turns out that the Tesla One app uses GraphQL commands to get the raw data. But you thought that we were just going to write some code, didn't you? However, in my experience, rarely do you just get to sit down and code. There's nearly always, in every project, wherever I've worked, there's nearly always something else you have to deal with in the ecosystem that stretches your comfort zone. In my case, that thing was NAT, or Network Address Translation Rules. These drive sane people mad. When I originally set up the Tesla control board, when I originally started monitoring the Tesla inverter, its controller is known as a taco, Tesla Asset Controller. This is an AI rendering of what that would look like as a taco. Looks delicious. But the taco itself has a strange internal IP address that is distinct from the IP address on the Ethernet port. So you cannot just query this nice 192.168 address and get data. You have to do a static route from this IP address to 192.168.91.1, and nothing else works. But I need to query 2 of them, which means I have to get creative with my NAT rules. By the way, this is the actual Tesla taco, the control circuit board that runs the whole inverter, and what Google Gemini thinks a taco version of it would look like. I think the guava capacitors look delicious. But we will come back to the Tesla taco a couple times more at this talk, so I thought it was important to tell you about. Some interesting things. This is the LAN port. This is the communication wires that provides the power, and these are the antennas. Which, by the way, these Tesla inverters are basically Tesla cars without wheels. These are automotive grade Wi-Fi antenna connectors. So if you've worked in the automotive industry, you may recognize these as spot connectors. I did ask my installer about replacing this battery, and they don't know. So if that ever dies, I'm in trouble. All right, getting back to business. This is the code for how I solve a network address translation. I create some virtual IPs, create some routes, then for both the output and the pre-routing table, I have to add some destination routes, then mangle the output with a mark, add that to a table, and then this is the return route. You don't really have to understand this. This took me months of arguing with ChatGPT about to get this working properly, but it did eventually work. This was back when AI was a bit worse, so it was a lot harder to get that answer back then. I asked multiple people in the community about how do I do this, and no one knew. So I think I'm the first person on the planet to ever make this working. Oh, I also wrote a Python version of it, which I don't have shown here. After I solved the multiple inverter problem and the network translation problem, the dashboard worked. I mean, literally, you saw it. It does work. So let's take a look at what I found. Here's some cool data. This just is sort of a sanity check to verify that the data that I'm getting from my system actually works, is actually right. So I mentioned earlier that the solar panel strings are in series, which means voltage is in series add. So if I know a reference voltage for how much each panel will have, I can divide the total string voltage by the reference voltage, and I should get the number of panels that I know from the installer diagram is on my roof. And sure enough, it adds up. So I'm supposed to have 50 panels. I go through, it adds up to 50 panels. This is a good sanity check to make sure that, yeah, this thing is, the data that is being returned here actually makes sense. So what I can do is if anything is wrong with this voltage graph, I know something is wrong with my roof. And sure enough, that's also what I found. Sometimes, not all the time, occasionally, some strings would just generate 0 volts for the entire day. The grain that I saw earlier was indeed real. The system has 8 strings, and this only shows 7 are working. Once I showed this to my solar installer, to my installer, they were able to figure out that something was indeed wrong. What's interesting to note, though, is they didn't believe me at first. They didn't believe me until a technician literally came to my house, opened up the inverter, put his meter on the wires, and saw that it was 0 voltage. Before that, I got multiple back and forth saying, everything's fine, you're smoking something, we don't know what you're talking about.
Chris,
Yes, sir.
did you say they have this information in their own cloud?
They do. Yeah, I'll get to that.
Okay.
They did. Tesla does have this information. And sorry, back up. Doug asked a question. Feel free to interrupt and ask a question anytime if you want to. But yes, Tesla does have this information. This information is in a pretty locked down API. Like you've seen, I have to go through hoops to get it. But the Tesla Taco, that's phoning home and reporting literally all of this to Tesla's cloud constantly. I don't have access to it. And foreshadowing, I asked them for access to it, and they got pretty mad that I even knew about it. Anyway, after this, my solar installer realized that I wasn't the only customer of theirs that had this problem. So there was more than one. I don't know how many, but I was losing energy. So how much energy? Oh, and by the way, in the top right here, we have the error codes that say something is wrong. Like inactive, unsafe photovoltaic string. That's not good.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Did you say that like Tesla has data on like everybody's solar panels, like how they're all performing throughout like all these inverter installations throughout the whole country? Like, is that?
Throughout the whole world.
And so that's being straight to their cloud, like, and they're using it for miscellaneous business purposes, is it like a privacy policy? Or something, how they're using that data, especially with like AI and all the, you know.
I don't know, actually, you know what? That's a good question. I should probably look at it.
They got mad when you asked about this cloud data, API.
Uh-huh.
Is that right? You said you got mad.
It's called Power Hub.
Power Hub?
Yeah.
So is there a way for you to turn off this data being streamed to Tesla servers?
No,
You can't turn it off or your system will turn off?
you void your warranty if you do that.
No, you can void your warranty, so you're basically giving them free data forever as long as
Yeah.
it works.
Yeah, pretty much.
So you have to unplug the, that's what we're doing.
You void your warranty.
I did that.
What?
I did that.
Yeah, you could do it, but then you void your warranty. Also, by the way, actually, why don't I rewind a little bit here? When I went into the taco, what does that look like? This thing?
SD card slot or LTE.
I don't think that's an SD card slot.
Oh, it's an LTE mode.
It's a, yeah, yeah. So you would have to pull the circuit board out, pull the SIM card out, and pull your network card. Yeah. So
There's a SIM card actually, so it's going to cell towers, it's not just your.
it literally says, if you look at the, let's see here, go way forward here, skipping way forward.
They fix it for free.
There's a cellular modem. Saying cellular connected. But anyway, I skipped a bunch of stuff. Alright. So, yeah. And you know, maybe voiding your warranty is fine if you really don't want Tesla phoning home. I mean, that's a reasonable state. That's a reasonable take. It's just a box that transforms power from DC to AC, really. But these boxes are worth about $3,000 to $6,000, depending on what they are. These are normal inverters. They are not the Powerwall with the battery, so they are a bit cheaper. Powerwall is much more expensive. So, and do these things break? Yes, they do break. Yeah.
In the Tesla app, you showed like there were 3 gray ones and one of them was green.
Yeah, that means that one was working that day.
Yeah, and in the Grafana one is only one yellow line, like.
Oh, because it's a different day. This drop here that happens didn't happen consistently. It's random. I actually did figure out that the two inverters are causing power line communication issues with each other. And if you start up one inverter before the other, you almost never have problems. And if you do the other way around, you will almost always get an error, these MCI errors. It's crosstalk because I guess 50 panels, 8 strings is a lot, and maybe Tesla's systems weren't designed to handle that load at that scale. I don't know. It is a defect. It's either a defective design or a defective installation. But yeah, on that day when I would have looked at that that Tesla One, this graph would have had more strings that used to be right. So, yeah. Anyway, let's move on and talk about how much energy did I actually lose. So, I gave this out a little bit, monitored it for about a month or two. In the very worst case, so this is an overestimate, about 100 kilowatt hours a month, 12 months a year, 19 cents per kilowatt hour, it's about $220 a year in electricity. That doesn't sound like much until you project it out over the 10-year payback period, which means I'm losing about 7 months worth of power and dollars that would have contributed to paying the system off. What's even more interesting is if you extrapolate this out to the nation. Tesla recently marketed that they had $1 million Powerwalls installed. If we assume that 1% is affected, about the same as me, that's about 12 gigawatt hours a year, 19 cents. Turns out that Pittsburgh's electricity rates are about the national average. That's about $2 million of power per year, or about 100 or 1,000 homes per year. So that's significant. And if this problem is any worse than that, obviously it gets worse. So that's not good. All right. However, a few months later, Tesla sorta fixed it. Although they fixed it in a way that may not sound quite so satisfying. Here's my educated guess as to what they did. When the system turns on, this is a sequence diagram, the inverter says, when the sun comes up, the inverter says, hey, close the switch, tells the panels to turn on. I believe the panels then return an ACK signal that says, okay, I've turned on, and then it starts sending power, and the inverter closes its contactors. I think what was happening is this ACK signal wasn't always getting back to my garage. And so what Tesla did, I think, is they pushed a firmware update that ignores that. If you send a turn on signal to the roof and you get power back, good enough. I don't know if that's safe. I think the ACK is probably there for a reason, but it does mean that I'm no longer losing power. So it was hard to fight with my installer about this, or Tesla, over this issue anymore. This is the email they sent me. However, the reason I think that they just ignored the ACK is even today, I am still getting MCI string errors. I'm just not getting a voltage drop anymore. So, any more thoughts, questions? All right, moving on. All right, so after this all is well, right? I contributed open source, found a bug, now it's fixed. I can kick back and enjoy some delicious tacos, right? Well, this presentation, what time is it? Yeah, it's not only half over. So clearly not. Also, you saw it a lot more slide. This happened on April Fool's Day of last year. Unfortunately, it wasn't a joke. Let's see, where is this? Oh, yeah. You don't know what this is, right? It's an Ethernet cable. The way the dashboard works is the system is continually pinging the inverter over my Ethernet interface through an Ethernet cable. The data is then recorded in a database called InfluxDB, which is a time series database that is pretty popular in the social world, and then gets accessed by Grafana, which is the dashboard you saw earlier. The snippets on this slide are saying that the open source community noticed that this cable is effectively cut. Tesla had disabled, and it turned out later what they did was they disabled the authentication mechanism that we were using to get into that 192.168.91.1 IP address. And for a while, the community thought that it was lost. But it turned out there was a workaround. We had to switch to Wi-Fi. Turns out that for some reason, the exact same static routes that used to work on the Ethernet cable now only works through Wi-Fi. So I had to buy a bunch of Wi-Fi adapters, high gain antennas, put them right over the top of the inverter where the antenna lives, which by the way, Tesla doesn't document where the antenna on the inverter is. I had to figure that out for myself. So I connected that from USB hub, got that all working. The dashboard largely was restored and the community moved on. Except life's never that easy. Oh, take a step back here, forgot about this. I did have to redo the NAT routing again as well. To get to the 192.168.91 address again, I had to rejigger the NAT rules. Instead of going from the LAN IPs to the static route, now there's two IP addresses of the exact same interface connected to the Raspberry Pi, so I have to route differently from each interface. So this is the bash code to do that. Again, some arguing with AI about how to do this, but because I had already done the hard version with hardwired Ethernet, this was a bit easier. And then this is the Python version of it that runs when, or that ran when the Raspberry Pi started up. So, now I can have that taco, right? No. So, this, I don't remember what day this is, but it was monitoring, it monitors the Wi-Fi, it monitors the data just fine, and then all of a sudden you notice that the data cuts out. Turns out, and then this is like what happens when the power flow diagram tries to query the real-time data and fails in terms of 404. There was a problem with one of my inverters. I mentioned earlier that there was a beeping device in my garage, and we returned to what that was. It was a symptom of something much worse. The Wi-Fi adapter on the top of that control board I showed you is bad. That meant that in the middle of the day or night, Wi-Fi errors, which are measured by this red line, see these errors slowly, they start small, and then they slowly build up to a crescendo, and then dead. It turns out that the SSID, the entire network interface of the inverter, just died. This meant that I was no longer able to consistently answer the question, is my system working properly? Note that Tesla has never officially supported this monitoring API, so going to them is a little bit hard. But I had one good inverter and one bad. The other inverter has never had a Wi-Fi glitch. The only fix I was aware of at the time was to flip the breakers in the garage to turn the inverter on and off, which meant that whenever I saw this, I'd have to run downstairs and flip the actual breaker. Actually, let me see. Yeah, a breaker right here. So, I have to run down and flip one of these. That's annoying. But even that was not a permanent fix because, again, it would work for a time, then again, errors would build up and then die again. But no worries, right? It's under warranty. I'll have to read those. The top is an email I got from my installer, and the blue-green is just a summary of a conversation I had with Tesla. They firewalled their support very heavily, and they did not have a lot of interest in replacing an inverter just for a dead Wi-Fi card. Because, again, their phone home is working. It just, my way of getting the data was not, which they don't officially support. So Tesla isn't going to replace it, but I never give up, right? So what else can I do? I did try a lot of things, replacing the power supply on the inverter, all kinds of different antennas. They drove my wife nuts. Thank you, Penny. I was constantly running down to the garage, trying all sorts of different things. If you're familiar with electrical engineering and radio frequency engineering, I tried putting ferrets on the cables. That didn't work. A lot of stuff. But if you can't beat them, join them. What if I connect the inverter itself to Wi-Fi? So the Raspberry Pi was using Wi-Fi to connect to the inverter itself. But the inverter that phoned home to Tesla, they were still happily using, they were still happily using this. what if I cut this for Tesla as well? Then they will notice that something is wrong. So if I switch the inverter to use Wi-Fi, it will force them to replace it. Instead, I discovered something weirder. I connected the inverter to Wi-Fi, and that started an internal watchdog that every time the Wi-Fi died, after about 20 minutes, it would restore itself. Very consistently. Not all the time. There were a few times when it never restored itself, because if you've ever tried to write a restart watchdog, you know it's kind of hard. Getting the state machine right is a nightmare. I tried writing my own version of that by cutting the power supply, and it just, even AI couldn't save me. So yeah, I did manage to get it to be stable. And the other advantage here is when the Wi-Fi died, it wasn't losing production. The inverter was still producing power the whole time. So that money that I'm using, saving on my power bill, was still coming through. And this is the part where you applaud. Wait a minute. Oh, crap. Give me a moment. I think I forgot something. Let me show you something. Oh. Do this. Give me a moment. Back. I stepped on the cable. Where did it go? Yeah. Give me a moment. Restore itself. Looks like it did.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Their cable, their rat's nest of cables kind of hard here. Anyway. So, we've been talking so much about this inverter, but I never actually showed you what it looks like on the inside. Would you like me to turn it on?
Absolutely.
All right. So, this is called a Molex microfit cable. And I have this connected to some jury-rigged Wago connectors here. So what I do is I take out this harness, which, don't tell Tesla. Put this in. So I'm going to be bad that if I throw the switch, it's going to explode. Wow. Come over here, you can see. There's some green lights on. It's kind of hard to see. But I will leave that on. And what I would direct you to do is wait a little bit on your phones and watch for this SSID to appear. That, the Wi-Fi access point of that inverter, had this disconnected from the grid. Can't log in because you have to have a Tesla account to do it. But that is what we would connect to with the Tesla One app to get the data. So anyway, give me a moment here. The taco is the green circuit board that's over here. This is the thing that was beeping at me. It's the fan to cool it. And this is all the expensive power electronics. So yeah, I brought the inverter with me. But here's an interesting question. If that's here, what's in my garage? Did I pull this out of the garage? I don't think my wife would have liked that very much. I eventually convinced them to do it. But it took a while. You remember, some of the conversations were dated earlier in 2025. They didn't tell me that they were going to do it until about Halloween of last year. And they didn't actually do it until earlier this month. That meant that the earlier talk, if we hadn't rescheduled, I wouldn't have been able to show you this guy. Has anyone seen the 2N1 AP yet?
Yep.
Yep. So how did I convince them? I was persistent, for sure. That's the first step, always be tenacious. But I used logic on them. And eventually that worked. Step one, I need to know that the thing I paid $38,000 for is working properly. I just need to know that. That is, like, I'll go to the state attorney general if I can't know that. Second, I proved that Tesla's own PowerPub cloud monitoring data was not sufficient. When I said, hey, I'm losing power earlier in 2025, they said, your system is operating properly multiple times until I had them come to my garage. I said, okay, you've proven yourself to be untrustworthy, so I have to monitor this myself. Tesla does have the data I want in their cloud. I just don't have access to it. And the warranty says free from all defects. So I gave them options. I didn't demand that they replace a $3,000 thing. I said, you have options. You can do some lower cost things, such as flip software switches. Like, you know, where'd my Ethernet cable go? Anyway, yeah, like they can flip a software switch, update the firmware, and restore this, right? They could give me access to their PowerPub database. They really did not like that. I said, put me in contact with one of your engineers. They also really did not like that. So they decided in the end, the simplest thing was to RMA the inverter. I will give credit to my solar installer who did love Tesla. Tesla and solar installers have a weird relationship. Just because it's a certified installer doesn't mean they can do everything. They're not necessarily empowered to make their own decisions without phoning Tesla first. I originally told my installer, hey, why don't you just give me an extra one from your inventory? And they're like, what extra one? Tesla doesn't give us that kind of stuff. All right. So we're all good now, right? And by the way, this is the defective inverter. And the one in my garage now does work fine. I haven't seen a problem with the Wi-Fi on that one. So we're good, right? Total victory. Well, almost. I'm never satisfied with my wife can attest to. I want my damn hardwired access back. Can AI help me? All right, so that Tesla One app, I downloaded it from my phone and cracked it open. And I took a look at it, and I found the main file that runs the app. It's called index.android.bundle, very creative. But it's 54 megabytes of minified, obfuscated React.js. And if you open it in VS Code, it looks like this. It's not so good. So, I felt out of luck on that one. The code to do cool stuff with the inverter is in there somewhere, but even doing a lot of analysis with deminification tools, deobfuscation tools, prepping through it, that was really hard. I even tried taking this index.js bundle and putting it, drag drop it into the ChatGPT Claude chatbot interface, but 54 megabytes, 54 megabytes is a bit large for that. Most of them are still limited. Even the large token limit Google Gemini was not. We couldn't make heads or tails out of it. It was wrong most of the time. For example, I would say, tell me what command restarts the inverter. It would be like, use this REST API. I just told you that everything uses GraphQL, so it was hallucinating. Anyway, I had another idea. What if I unzip the APK into a folder, then open that in VS Code, and then ask Claude Code and we've all, I don't know how many of you have started using Claude Opus 4.6, but that one seems to have been a step change in the sophistication of AI. This was able to find something, as you can see here. As I mentioned, Tesla changed, they didn't actually block the hardwired cable, they just changed the off protocol. But no one in the open source community could figure out how. But I did. This over here is a picture of the Raspberry Pi that I took a few days ago in my garage. You'll notice, just like Pinocchio, there's no more strings. There's no more USB Wi-Fi adapter. That's why I'm able to bring this here, because it's not connected to the garage. The Raspberry Pi is running over PoE, so I only need to plug in one cable. And you can see here, you might say, well, sorry. You might say, well, wait a minute, the Raspberry Pi has an internal Wi-Fi adapter, I might be lying to you. Well, this is proof that I'm not using that either. So, it also turns out that this authentication protocol no longer requires those crazy NAT static routes either. I can just query the inverter from the main IP address, and it works. I figured this out while taking a break from playing games at a LAN party about a month ago. So again, if we had had the presentation in January, I wouldn't have been able to get this to you. This is also the part of the clock. All right, final lessons. We're almost at the end. Well, I'm proud of this dashboard and what it's capable of. The reality right now is that in Tesla's eyes, even though I pay full price for the system, I'm treated like a tenant. They're renting their system, not an owner of it. And that goes back to some of the questions people were asking about privacy and data collection and stuff. Yeah, that's not okay. Tesla is not unique though. Most modern inverters are tethered to their cloud system. I bought the hardware, but the manufacturer owns the data. This is true of a lot of solar products out there, and it's true of a lot of Internet of Things or smart devices in general, right? The reverse engineered API that I used AI to hack through the APK or that the PyPowerful community used, Tesla can pull that back anytime. They could break it, they could make it better. There's no control. But at the end of the day, I don't want to ask a server in Palo Alto how much sun is shining on my roof. That's ridiculous. I should be able to access this locally. So what can we do? For a moment, I will get political. Vote for candidates who support the right to repair initiatives. This isn't new. This has been talked about all over the country for a long time. There is something called an open inverter movement, but I couldn't find much about it. Some of you may ask, are there solar installers out there that do a better job of this? I think so. Some names that came to mind, Victron, Fronius, SMA, although I haven't done a ton of research into that. If I were to replace this system, I would probably dive into that a little bit more. If you go solar, maybe consider those brands. But do I regret going with Tesla? Well, right now, everything's working fine. If they don't rug pull me, I'm happy. But knowing what I know now in the future, I would probably consider other options. Another question that I'm often asked is, how do I get into open source? People ask me this all the time. I would say that one of the best ways software engineers can change the world is by contributing to open source. But how do you do that? First, find a project you're passionate about. Doesn't really matter what it is. One of the first projects I ever contributed to was XRDP Remote Desktop. And now I'm contributing a lot to PyPowerwall. There's probably a project that appeals to you, you just have to find it. Then dive into the community, find out what resources they have, their Discord channel, their meetups, their mailing lists. And then ask them a lot of questions, right? What technology does the product use? And then the next thing is to dive deeply into the code. When I contributed to XRDP, I probably spent the first 6 months just reading the code and talking on issues and asking questions. You won't be able to contribute meaningfully on a large open source project that has been evolving for years in just a few weeks. It's not that easy. And some projects I've only ever contributed issues and questions. I've never actually contributed code. And there was one project where I wrote one issue and they told me it was one of the most important issues of the entire project. No code. But anyway, I would encourage all of you to think about how you can contribute to open source. So get out there. Now here's another interesting question that I get asked a lot. Are software developers still invaluable if AI can do most of it? Are we going the way of the dodo bird? I don't think so. But I did read a while ago that AI has ended the era of humans writing syntax. That doesn't mean we're not contributing. Personally, I don't know that I really enjoyed writing syntax that much. Figuring out how do I exactly do this kind of loop in Python was never that fun for me. I don't know if it was for you. But like the captain in this picture, I still had to set a course. I still had to keep things on track with this whole investigation. Like I mentioned earlier, the AI would constantly be like, I'm going to investigate a REST API. When like, no, protobuf, GraphQL, that's what you need to be looking at, AI, right? Also, what happens when things go wrong? What happens when the AI writes something that's just completely wrong? You still have to fix it. Another thing is, the AI didn't do any of that diplomacy with Tesla to get them to replace the inverter. I had to figure that out. I had to be persistent with them. Perhaps there will be a version of an agentic AI in the future that will bug someone to fulfill your warranty for months on end, but I shudder at how much tokens that's going to cost, right? I will concede, though, that AI does make the impossible possible. The community consensus was that hardwired access was gone and gone for good and not coming back. I even talked to some people who knew people at Tesla about secondhand information, and they said, no, it's gone. But I chose to be bold and ask the AI to try in spite of that. I was still the motivating force, the spark to make it, to ask it to do that. And then finally, all of us, if you're in software, deal with a problem that's well known called dealing with ambiguity. Different people may ask for different contradictory things on the same product. And for PyPowerwall, this applies where they advertise themselves as a community that is very newbie friendly, new programmer friendly. But this is a very complicated space with a lot of nuances about how to get the right data. So how do we monitor the inherent complexity of knowing, the many different Tesla SKUs, the many different APIs, the many different login modes, and still keep it simple enough that somebody just out of college can contribute to it? That's highly ambiguous, not easy, and I don't think AI can solve that problem. You still need the human touch. So personally, I don't think software engineering as a discipline is going anywhere. AI is a tool that can accelerate software work, but I still had to make this presentation. And also, a lot of the art here is AI generated. That picture of the caption, I really like that one, is AI generated. Most of these are Gemini or Claude or some variation thereof. Give credit where credit is due. And that's it. Questions? Yes?
When Tesla gave that firmware update that cut off the hardline connection,
Yeah.
was that intentional? To cut you guys out?
So, actually, I don't think so. So this is a bit in the weeds. It didn't make it into the presentation because I had to cut it for length. But I actually think what they did was actually in some way caused by the open source community itself. So some background here. This is not the first time the PyPowerwall community has had to contend with Tesla yanking data access. This happened shortly after the project was established in I think the same year I got solar installed, 2024. They yanked the REST API. Remember I told you that the AI kept looking for REST APIs? That's because there are references to it, dead code in the APK, because they yanked that away and replaced it with the GraphQL API. So Jason from the PyPowerwall community went to Tesla and said, hey, I want my data back. And lo and behold, the executives actually did talk to him. It does help that he himself was an executive at Disney, so probably some clout there. But anyway, the story he told me is Tesla said, we can't commit to supporting this API. And he said, well, okay, so apparently there's a really bad thunderstorm out right now that might knock out some people's power, right? If you have a Tesla Powerwall, you still need to be able to look at your battery percentages and how much power your house is using, even if you lost internet access, even if you lost grid power, because your house is now battery powered. And he said, what is your local API monitoring option? We don't have one. The 2510 update is when they added that, which I think means they were monkeying with the auth protocol, which had the side effect of blocking the LAN connection. Does that make sense?
That's crazy. Yeah. It sounded very intentional, like they were trying to.
I don't think it was.
Yeah. But you're probably right. It was something.
I don't think it was malicious, because another thing that's happened in the community, I was able to restore full hardwired access for my inverters. The Powerwall community was almost able to do the same thing, but they actually have to use the local monitoring facility that Tesla added. And that is different. That requires registering an RSA key. I don't have to do that for some reason. All I have to do is log in and get an error token. I don't have to use an RSA key, but the Powerwall do. And there are certain Powerwall nodes that still don't work with the hard drive access, but I think it's mostly an auth protocol. Probably left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, unintentional side effect. And then it has the effect that if you don't have somebody who's constantly focused on the customer experience,
Right.
these things do get lost. And Tesla is infamous for not having it. I think Elon cut their PR department, right? Something like that. Yeah.
I have a really dumb question.
Okay,
Can you go back to your bottom dashboard?
sure. Let's take a look at it. Give me a moment. Sure.
Can you go all the way to the top?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I didn't mention how the power flow diagram.
This was actually ripped off from Tesla themselves, with their permission. The PyPowerwall community was able to convince Tesla, hey, can we have the JS code for this? It is a gigantic, obfuscated mess of a thing that they've only been able to poke at to make changes to make it load in the dashboard. But this is actually Tesla's own work from like 5 years ago. It's not the most stable. Sometimes if you load it on a slower internet connection, it glitches, but it is very pretty. And the reason there's a big gap here is that gap would show the power wall if I had one. Yeah, the battery. So I eventually intend to use AI to fix this up and clean up the code and make it load better and faster. You know, I was working on the presentation.
Another question about your power or your inverter.
Yeah.
How do you even have that? Do you think about that? And if not, what are you gonna do with it?
So, that's a good question. I think my wife is not gonna like the answer. She doesn't like it when I store random electronics everywhere. I should probably turn this thing on. Internally, that thing is shouting with lots of alerts because it's mad that it can't connect to the grid. But anyway, when the installer replaced the inverter, I was like, do you require that be returned to Tesla? And they're like, no, we just recycle it. You wanna keep it? And I'm like, they said, the advantage of keeping it would be many years from now, if it's out of warranty, I have spare parts. So it's probably gonna go in the shed, in the attic, something like that. Yeah. They apparently don't require that it be returned, which is interesting because for their cars, they are a little bit more aggressive, from what I understand.
And does the thing have, was the JTAG connector? Can you get it to firmware of it?
It has a CAN bus connector, which is over here somewhere. Actually, it turns out these, so.
Really?
Two of these wires are power, two of them are CAN bus. So you could intercept that and decode the actual raw automotive signals that are being run in the background. The community hasn't gotten there yet. But they have in the cars. The cars, they have reverse engineered the CAN bus. So all that is using a very similar protocol. I sent a picture of this to a friend of mine who works for a Tesla dealership, and he said some of the components in here look familiar. So. Any other questions? Should we wrap it up?
Thanks everyone for coming out tonight. And let's see for another round of applause.
And thank you to my beautiful wife for putting up with me while I did all this investigation.